Very good. Thank you. Well, again, thank you for this opportunity to speak to everyone this morning, this afternoon, this evening. Honored to be able to present here with Jacqueline. I'm just going to go through a couple quick slides here about DNVGL, and then we'll get into the real meat of the presentation, which is on FSSC 22000. Jacqueline, if you can go to the first slide, please. Just briefly, who is DNVGL and how we fit into this whole equation with certification? We're one of the leading registrars in the world providing assurance services, specifically in the food and beverage industry, which is where we're focusing. We do other activities throughout the different sectors, but both assurance services and certification, supply chain, and geographies. We're a global company. We work with key clients around the world, large multinationals, enterprise clients, and also the smaller ones throughout the different countries, and differentiating ourselves on our independence and risk-based approach and digitalization with big data. Next, please. So again, as an independent assurance provider providing services throughout, and we'll get into this with FSSC 22000 in the different parts that FSSC does provide certification with in the different sectors throughout the industry. So we'll get into the details about that, but just knowing that we do provide services through across the whole supply chain. Next. And the services are specifically to the GFSI certifications, and we're going to be presenting today about FSSC, and I think everybody can read this on their own, but it just does represent the different services we provide. Without further ado, I'd like to now turn this over to Jacqueline, and I will be on throughout the whole presentation to assist with any Q&As regarding certification. Just one last slide with our global presence that I think I mentioned before previously. But we can help, I'll help throughout the presentation and in the Q&A regarding the certification steps and anything to do with the new changes to the new version. Jacqueline, I'll turn it over to you again. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Kathleen. I hope everybody can hear me. I know that I can see in the sidebar that some people are having difficulty with their audio. So I'm hoping that a lot of your problems have been sorted out, and that I'm speaking to you all over the world this morning. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you also to IFSQN and to DNV for this opportunity to talk to you today. It's a very timely webinar with all the changes and updates that are going on. So I'm pleased to be here. Let me just see if I can move my slides. That always helps. So what I'm going to do today is, I'm not quite sure how many of you out there have a in-depth knowledge of FSSC and who's actually FSSC certified, and you know, who's looking to be FSSC certified. So if you want to sort of type in the sidebar what your main interest is, and if you are already FSSC certified, then I'll know the level of which to pitch this webinar. My plan is to do a non-technical outline, really, to explain what FSSC 22000 is, where it's coming from, what our current status is, and what was the push to become updated, what are the key elements, and why were the key elements important in this current regulatory environment that we find ourselves. So if we have CBs that are listening and you would like more information into the technical aspects of FSSC, we do have our CB forum, which is updated all the time, and a team of technical advisors that can help you on the in-depth technical things. So I'm going to be talking to you from Washington, DC, and I see that a lot of people are actually interested in how FSSC can help meet the requirements of FSMA.
Just to say, sorry, Jacqueline, just to say, when you invited the comments, I've been watching the scroll down, and of those that are typing in, quite a number are already certified to FSSC 22000 and looking for updates. And also there are a few auditors and one or two that are looking to get certified down the line.
So I think that's great. So very good, and thank you very much for joining us. And I'm pleased to talk to you today. So just a quick outline for those that are not familiar with FSSC or they're looking to become certified and why they should become certified. I think an explanation of FSSC is best laid out in our mission. And our mission is to be the world's leading independent GFSI recognized ISO-based food safety quality management scheme for the whole food supply chain. And some of the key words in that is the GFSI recognition. We are one of a family of GFSI benchmarked certification schemes or certification programs, as they are now known. We're independent, being owned by the Foundation for FSSC 22000, which is totally independent. We're a non-profit. We use the ISO-based public availability standards, which again gives us an independence. So just to recap on why ISO is important, and for any of you that were able to check in last week into the training session, there was a very in-depth background into the how ISO systems work and how ISO 22000 contributes to worldwide food safety. So I won't go too much into depth, but I know that Simon still has that available if you want more in-depth training actually on ISO. So the ISO basis gives us a very strong foundation. And the ISO stands for the International Standards Organization, which is a global organization. In some countries, it's actually the regulations that has 163 national standards bodies that contribute to it. And it produces voluntary standards that are developed by consensus of technical experts throughout the world. So it keeps it relevant to the global situation. And it provides a common global language. And in these days of trying to harmonize, it gives us that good platform to build on of that food safety management basis. It also is very useful in this global market that we have, with allowing integration within the major food producers to integrate with other management systems. Obviously, we use the ISO 22000 family of standards, but this is also integratable with other management standards like 9001 for quality, ISO 14000 for environment, and ISO 5000 for energy. So it's a good way of harmonizing. It, as I said, it uses the technical expertise that's available throughout the world. And there are currently in the region of 32,000 ISO certificates. It's particularly in the developing countries, which allows them to have the technical expertise shared with them from the more developed markets. So the ISO 22000 provides FSSC 22000 with the framework. So ISO 22000 is the basic food safety management system of the FSSC 22000 certification program. And that defines the requirement for management commitment, communication up and down the supply chain, for training, for employee engagement, and demands the requirement for prerequisite programs. It is applicable across the supply chain, and in order to be specific, FSSC is also uses the prerequisite programs, and the prerequisite programs are the sector-specific requirements for the different areas of the supply chain. Whereas ISO 22000 is applicable across the supply chain, the prerequisite programs are specific to a particular sector, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's packaging, whether it's feed manufacturer. They are different in each of the scopes. So they're equivalent to the GMPs or the GAPs. And the one that I'm going to focus on today, just because it's more relevant to people's interest in FSMA, is the ISO Technical Statement 22002.1 for manufacturing. In addition, within the FSSC 22000 scheme, is the FSSC 22000 additional requirements. And these are very important to FSSC 22000 because it brings the ISO 22000 food safety management system in compliance with the GFSI requirements. FSSC 22000 is quite a latecomer to the party. GFSI has been in existence until 2000, but ISO 22000 was not developed until 2005. In 2009, FSSC was able to bring together the available prerequisite programs for marketing in order to achieve GFSI benchmarking in 2010. So it's quite a young system, and the additional requirements are those that support the integrity of the scheme. It provides the requirements for the certification bodies and the accreditation bodies, and it also adds the additional requirements to the PRPs that are required for our stakeholders. So the three components make up FSSC 22000. Without the three components, it's not FSSC and it's not GFSI recognized. So when you're certified to FSSC 22000, you will be certified to the requirements in ISO 22000, supported by the specific scope, the scope-specific prerequisite program, and then the additional requirements, and that makes up the GFSI. So where are we right now with this young GFSI standard? So to update you, it's currently being revised to 4.1, and 4.1 has allowed us to update those requirements. As I said, because we are based on the ISO 22000 global standards, those are developed by consensus and they're not developed by us. We use those as the global standard. What's in our control are the FSSC 22000 requirements. And those, as Simon mentioned at the beginning, has recently been revised to FSSC 4.1. That's allowed us to add some additional scopes. It also allows us the inclusion of FSSC 22000 for quality. And we're in a situation where we have grown to nearly 17,000 certificates worldwide. Of those, 14,500 are manufacturing and 2,500 are packaging worldwide. So just to fill you in, and I know I'm talking to a global audience, as I say, we've had precipitous growth. We were first available around about 2010. Last year we hit our 15,000 certificate mark, and we're growing rapidly to nearly 17,000 right now. We are global. We are have certificates all over the world. We're probably one third Asia, 1/3 Europe, and 1/3 in Americas. And with North America currently our fastest growing market. We're working with 104 certification bodies all over the world. We have certificates in 154 countries, and we're working with a lot of the major manufacturers and the well-known names. The ISO 22000 is important to many of these companies. Obviously, they have facilities all over the world. It allows them to economize on their platform of food safety management. So everybody can be using the same framework of management. It's useful for educating your staff, transfer of products around the world between facilities. So it provides that that step of harmonization. And as well, the companies can integrate the food safety management with their other management. And I apologize if everybody's name is not. We are fast growing, so we'll have to add, I know, more logos, more companies that are joining us. So I apologize if we're if you're not represented. So currently the scopes that are covered in this scheme, we're in a situation where we've expanded our scope and we cover from manufacturing in 22.1, packaging in 2.4, animal feed, primary production, transport and storage, catering, and retail. So we're in a position to offer certification right across the supply chain based on ISO 22000. So why was the need to update? Well, as I said, FSSC 22000 was published first in 2010. It was updated to version 2 in 2011 and version 3 in 2013, and hasn't really seen much more evolution until version 4. And the push to produce version 4 was the update of the GFSI requirements. We are a GFSI recognized scheme, and so keeping in line with GFSI is very important to FSSC 22000, and so version 4 was updated to meet the requirements of GFSI guidance document 7.0. The subsequent publication of 7.1 required us to just adjust 4.0 to 4.1, and 4.1 was published in July 2017. So this is very new. The subtle edits were due to evaluation and feedback once we published 4.0 from our certification bodies and our accreditation bodies. So we now have version 4.1. And one of the key things that hopefully will make it easier for FSSC 22000 is a reorganization of our scheme documents. And these are the key to FSSC 22000, and they're all available on the website on fssc22000.com. And they clarify and outline the different requirements of FSSC. We have the definitions, and definitions and terminology is one of the keys to harmonization in food safety. And I'm sure everybody listening will know the issues that we have sometimes with using the same terms for using different terms for the same thing, or the same terms for different things. So we have definitions which are in line both with ISO 22000 and with GFSI. We have a scheme overview in part 1, and then we have requirements for certification, our regulations and requirements for the certification process, our certification bodies and our accreditation bodies. And this is extremely important for the integrity of FSSC 22000. So these requirements keep certification consistent all over the world and in line with the requirements and expectations of the certification scheme. So I do recommend you go to the website to familiarize yourself with the new documents. They're extremely well produced, very clear, and it's a full credit to our technical team for upgrading them in this way. So the revised elements in version 4 include now the use of unannounced audits in FSSC 22000. Also, the requirement for food fraud prevention and food defense programs. We have new requirements for auditor competence. As I said, this is important in the integrity of the program. We have requirements for non-conformity grading, again, all as part of maintaining consistency. There is also a requirement for a standardized audit report, which means that everybody's audit report covers the same issues and the same elements, which is important both for our integrity assessors and also moving forward in the regulatory context. It provides that harmonization so that the audit reports can be used across the board in the supply chain. It's allowed the scope extensions and added the new scopes. It also has facilities to do audit of offsite activities and the use of computer assisted techniques, regulations for multisite in certain facilities, and also the new FSSC quality scope, which involves the incorporation and the integration of ISO 9001 and ISO 22000 to produce a quality module. So I'm going to focus on these elements today because we have limited time, and these are ones that I think are going to be more relevant to the regulatory environment that we're in. We're all talking, at least in the US, on the application of FSMA and how the GFSI schemes relate to FSMA. The revision of FSSC 22000 version 4, well, as I said, was provoked by changing regulations as well as upgraded requirements from GFSI. So we have upgraded it with all these regulatory requirements in mind. So hopefully we're closing the gap, and I'm going to come back to that towards the end. So why unannounced audit? There's a lot of buzz about unannounced audits and their value, and are they relevant, and how are we going to incorporate unannounced audits into the GFSI certification program? Unannounced audits are part of the regulatory influence on the certification scheme. There is an expectation by governments that audits can be unannounced, and that all food manufacturers are audit ready all the time. And if you have a food safety management system, such as FSSC 22000, which is based on the management system framework, you should be operative at the same level at all the time. So you should be audit ready all the time. And the government and the regulatory inspections are likely to be unannounced. So we should be in a framework that you should be in a mindset that you can be audited at any time. So that's one of the bases behind the introduction of the unannounced audits. And with everything else, new developments are usually brought in as a result of a food safety issue. And this was after the horse meat scandal of several years ago. They think that the unannounced audits may have a beneficial effect. The GFSI benchmarking requirements also have an expectation of unannounced audits, and FSSC have introduced, and FSSC did conduct a pilot as to how we would be able to incorporate unannounced audits into FSSC. One of the issues with FSSC is because we are a management system, you require management commitment, so an audit is going to require many personnel to be available. So there was a question as to whether a full management system audit could be conducted unannounced. So the decision that it could be made if we were to replace at least one surveillance audit from FSSC. So the requirement is the certification audit is once every 3 years, and the surveillance audits are in the 2 years in between to maintain an annual audit cycle. And one of the surveillance audits could be replaced by an unannounced audit. They are within obviously a framework because it's on an annual basis, and they will be required in an association with discussions with your certification body. So they're probably going to be in at least a 30-day window, but it depends on your cycle. And all the full details are in the requirements, but that's now going to be a regular part of FSSC 22000. Another requirement that has come in, sadly, because of food scandals and incidences, and is also a part of both the GFSI new requirements, is a requirement for a food defense program. And this is now included as part of FSSC version 4. And there is a requirement for a documented assessment procedure. And this will all be supported by the food safety management system. And this requires that it's a documented plan, that it's really part of your risk assessment, and your procedures are documented, verified and validated, and that you have control measures, you have considered and incorporated control measures to reduce or eliminate threats. And this again needs to comply both with the food safety management system in ISO 22000 and also comply with the legislation of the country in which you're manufacturing and marketing. So, again, with the legislation in mind, FSSC now requires a food defense program. It also needs you to consider food fraud. So again, there is a requirement for documented food fraud assessment. Again, this needs to be supported by the organization's food safety management system and comply with the applicable legislation. And this means that you have to look at potential vulnerabilities. And with any FSSC certified facility, of course, it's flexible, and that your risk assessment will depend on the product that you are producing. And so you will theoretically be familiar with your potential vulnerabilities of the food type that you're producing. And so again, you have to verify and validate the measures that you put in. Again, it's a requirement that is required by legislation and GFSI. And so an example of food fraud might be the dilution of olive oil, or the contamination, the contamination recently of spices, either with wood chips or with ground up peanut shell. And again, that produces other issues. It produces allergens, but or the switching of fish types for cheaper version. So all of these are now food fraud. While they may not always pose a food safety risk, there is always potential for a food safety risk. And we have a history. The melamine issue from China was an example. And that's really one of the things that initiated concern with food fraud. Allergen management is another issue that is of concern in the regulatory field. And while allergen management is already included in the PRPs and ISO 22000, version 4 has brought it in to consider as a potential preventive control. And it just reinforces the requirement to consider potential allergen cross-contamination and to include validation and documentation of validation and verification measures, and also a requirement for labeling. Again, this is in the regulatory arena, a requirement if any potential contaminations of allergens, if allergens are in the facility, for instance, then there is a requirement to label. Obviously, it's materials produced in a facility that's also handling allergens or peanuts. So again, this needs to be in accordance with the regulatory requirements, and is now an extra consideration as part of the FSSC requirements. An environmental monitoring program is also mentioned in the requirements, and there is in the FSSC requirements. And if environmental monitoring is to be used as a verification of a sanitation program, then you have to include it in the documentation, validation, and verification. And again, these are the requirements of the management system, and as described in ISO 22000. And they could be used as a verification procedure for preventive control of sanitation. And if you use them, then it has to meet the requirements of ISO 22000 and be included in the verification. So that's now included in FSSC 22000. And in addition to the other elements that I mentioned earlier, the standard report format, multisite, use of computer-aided techniques, there is also the addition of scopes. And so now FSSC certification is available for storage and transportation companies. It's available for retail organizations and available in catering for certification. And again, the requirement for a standard audit report format, which will help in the consistency of the report format, and additional requirements for auditor competence and accreditation, which are all part of the integrity program of FSSC 22000. And again, if we're moving towards a public-private partnership, we need to be assured of the robustness of the audits and the audit reliability that comes through the integrity program. So all these refinements are all being made, obviously, in a background of all the activity around FSMA. And so then there was FSMA, and one of the most asked questions that I get every day is, if I'm FSSC 22000, do I meet the requirements of FSMA? And if I'm an importer and I'm receiving a product from a company that's FSSC 22000, what does this mean? So the answer to the question 2 is FSSC 22000, am I compliant with FSMA? That's a question that we're all been asking ourselves. So what was FSMA? So FSMA is a long-awaited revision of the US regulation. I think it was the first time since the 30s that it's really been looked at, and it was overdue. It has incorporated an update of good manufacturing practices and the introduction of what's now known as HARPC. And this is a hazard assessment with preventative controls. And it's equivalent to a food safety plan with preventive controls. And it's moving away from just a hazard assessment, which is a hazard assessment with critical control points. So all the critical control points are now preventive controls, but preventative controls required beyond the critical control points. It is US-centric, but of course it has far-reaching influences. And as I know, I'm talking to people all over the world. If you're looking into the US market, you really want to know what FSMA means to you. And it is a focus on supply chain. There are preventive controls that need to focus actually on the suppliers. Suppliers have to be verified both domestically and foreign. And there is an emphasis on training and engagement, and on food safety culture, and on moving the responsibility of producing safe food onto the manufacturer. So how can FSSC 22000 help with FSMA compliance? I think already we've seen a lot of common ground. We did do a gap analysis originally with the Atchison Group, who did a comparison of GFSI certification against FSMA, and many of the GFSI certification schemes come up very well when compared to FSMA. A lot of them are requiring preventive controls, they're requiring good manufacturing practices, they're requiring food safety plans, and FSSC also comes up quite well, and many of the requirements look very good, and there are no specific elements that are actually missing. But there are some certain details. And there was a phrase that was used, a GFSI certified facility will be in a good place to meet the requirements of FSMA. So our question was, what is that place? And so how close really are we to meeting the requirements of FSMA? And what we have done, we looked at the two schemes. And of course, immediately, there are some similarities. Both use a preventive controls and flexible management system. The food safety management system of ISO 22000 compares very well with the food safety plan of FSMA. Both require flexibility and accountability. The HARPC is very similar to the FSSC 22000 plan of HACCP for ISO 22000 and the operational prerequisite programs, which need controls of additional preventive measures. Both have a food safety plan, which compares the food safety management system, and in both systems, training and engagement is important. It moves the responsibility of food safety management onto the company, and communication and commitment feature both in FSMA and FSSC 22000. So there are many similarities right from the beginning, but where was the difference? So for everybody at home, so what is the gap? Where is the gap? So we have great alignment, but there is a difference, and the difference is the thing that both, the discussions of this private public partnership are the things that trip us up. Many companies that are FSSC 22000 certified have found that they have sailed through recent FDA inspections. They have found that they are very similar. There is no issue that they are meeting all the requirements of FSMA. But there is a specific nature of the regulatory requirements in FSMA that we need to take in hand. There is an increased requirement for documentation, and there are specific supply chain preventive controls and sanitation controls that are slightly different in FSMA. So how do we know that we are, how do we know where these gaps are, and how can we help you close the gap when you're using FSSC 22000 with FSMA? So what we have done, and what will be available to everybody very soon, is we've done a line-by-line comparison of FSSC 22000 requirements against the requirements of the preventative control rules for human food. We're just focusing on human food right now. One of the reasons that it's taken a while is because we've updated FSSC to 4.0 and then 4.1. So we are now closing the gap really with 4.1, and we will be, ultimately producing a supplement just to draw attention to those specific areas where FSMA requires some additional details. There is a requirement for increased documentation, and the regulations for keeping documentation for 2 years, for having them available for FDA inspection. There is the need for the verification of suppliers, which while certain FSSC certified companies may be doing that within the requirement for communication up and down the supply chain, you may not be focused specifically on the verification suppliers, or you may be using a different terminology. As I mentioned earlier, terminology and differences in how you refer to things could be taken as being an inadequacy or a lack. But the verification suppliers and both domestic and foreign is required. It has to be documented, which can be done within the food safety management system. And these are the issues that you just need to pay specific attention to. And the preventive controls for allergen management, for sanitation, and the supply chain. Some of these gaps are filled in by our requirements in 4.1, and some of them are, some of them you may already be doing, but they'll be focused in this supplement. So we hope that we are closing the gap with 4.1. We hope that we can be, a good tool for all companies to aid compliance. And with our ISO 22000 framework, we hope that we're offering a common approach to food safety management. We're always open to develop public-private partnerships, which are dependent on transparency and openness. We hope that we can aid, the FDA in meeting their huge goals of achieving food safety, not only for the US population, but it's going to have this knock-on effect in worldwide food supply chain that we all benefit from. There is transparency to help in supplier verification. We hope that we can contribute to this by having our standard audit report format, that everybody's used to seeing the same information in the same format, and to continue improvement. Continuous improvement is a huge issue in 22000 by data sharing, and by making these changes and by tools such as this webinar, hopefully contribute to food safety, to global food safety. So I'm going to stop there, but before I stop there, I really have to thank and give full credit to the technical team of FSSC 22000, and to thank my team back and in the US, to Jules, our technical advisor, and to Alden, our technical director. And thank you for listening. And we can take some questions.
Okay, yeah. If you can stop sharing your screen now, Jacqueline. Thanks very much for that update. There has been a lot of questions. Yeah, if you just click the circular icon again to stop sharing and switch your webcams back on. Lots of questions. I've been highlighting them. I'll start from the bottom, and Kathleen, this is where you can jump in.
Sure.
I won't be answering any, but you take your pick. So, Doug, what does FSSC 22000 quality require extra time for FSSC and ISO 9000? How much additional audit time is required for the quality module, I think is asking. Is there an add-on quality module?
There's FSSC 22000Q, which yes, there is, and it's hard to define that unless I know the specifics about the site. But it's I can say it's between a half a day to 1.5 days, but I can't give you that exact description. But there's also the ability to integrate 9001 with FSSC 22000 also. So there's two different ways to do that.
Okay, right. Guru is asking what is meant by PAS.
That's the publicly available specification, and that was developed for each of the different sectors as Jacqueline described to further enhance the prerequisite programs. So they're developed by the industry and turned into technical specifications.
Okay, Summer wrote down earlier, I've not got the name of who asked it, how do you go about becoming an auditor for FSSC 22000?
Okay, that's a very good question, and we get that a lot. There's certain requirements that is specified by the GFSI, and then further for the by the standard owner, which is Jacqueline, who she represents, and it has to do with your background in the industry, minimum 5 years, and your auditing experience, and then you would have to apply with a certification body and become qualified through witness audits, which are a requirement, and also review, of course, of your background audit logs. So I do get a lot of people that are trying to get into the food industry that are coming from different industries, and it's really impossible because of the background knowledge that you need working in the industry, and also the number of audits in the food safety different categories.
Okay, great. And where can we buy copies of FSSC 22000, or is it free? Can you switch your webcam on, Jacqueline? Sorry, your microphone.
Okay, I beg your pardon. Some people would say that's a good place to be, to have me silence. But anyway, so the requirements of FSSC 22000 are available free of charge from the website, fssc22000.com. The ISO standards are available from iso.org. They are registered, produced under contract, so you have to buy those. They're available, I think, for about $100 each. But they are purchasable and available from iso.org. You can see them online actually to review them if you're interested. I noticed that's a fairly new development through ISO, but you have to get the ISO requirements from ISO and the FSSC 22000. That third component of the scheme are available free of charge for download on fssc22000.com.
Okie dokie. Spring did ask, can you give some examples of food fraud? But I think you did that actually within your presentation. Another question was the procedure for certification. Can you just give us a little bit of background on the procedure for certification?
Sure.
Process?
Yes. It all depends on your starting point, but typically an organization will do a pre-assessment, a self-assessment on themselves, or have a CB do a pre-assessment, and then we will do the document review. It's a two-step, and then the on-site audit. And as Jacqueline said, they are it's a 3-year certification cycle and 2 surveillance audits in between. And one thing that I want to note with the unannounced audits, because next year is a transition year in 2018, there really will not be unannounced audits in 2018. So it cannot be done on the transition year. So I think that will resonate well with the industry and understanding that.
Yeah, quite a few people actually. I was going to come on to that. We were mentioning the timescale for an announced audit, so you've answered 2 questions in one there.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you. The difference between food defense and food fraud. Some people get confused with these terms quite often.
So I could say that it really depends on sort of the motivation. So food defense is protecting from malice, and food fraud tends to be an economical motivation. Tends to be depends on whether you take that as malicious. So food defense could be a poisoning, protection from a poisoning of the system. Food fraud is a protection from a contamination or a dilution of a food product by a cheaper substitute.
Okay.
So it may not incorporate a food safety issue, but there's always a potential. So it's to be avoided.
Okay, great. Mark Kwan, this is quite interesting. Flexible packaging company certified to FSSC 22000. Auditors are asking management of allergens, section 2.1.4. He's saying it's not relevant. How can he convince auditors, or maybe you can convince him that allergens might be relevant to a food packaging manufacturer? What's your thoughts on allergen control for food packaging?
You want to take that, Kathy? I didn't hear all of that question. I'm going to. It was a bit contorted. I'm going to go see if I can find that. Again, most of these issues are to do with your own verification, and if you can prove that there's no risk, it's that's the nature of the management system. I'm just looking for it. So. Carry on, Kathy.
Did you get that, Kathleen?
Yes, I did. And we do get this question quite often from the packaging industry. And
I've got it here.
It's, how does allergens apply? And you've got to look at even your suppliers to you in their allergen controls. And if anything's passed on, in the packaging, it could be produced in an allergen zone, and that's brought in to your facility with the ingredients and the raw materials that go into what you're producing in your packaging. So you've got to look at that, and also it could even be employee practices and things that they might have in the cafeterias that are allergenic. So there is some applications. It's not the same as in food processing, but there is still the risk assessments that need to be done around that.
Yeah, I would just ask Mark, actually, do you have any controls for employee foodstuffs such containing nuts and things? Do employees change their workwear prior to the canteen and things like that, that perhaps it could carry some nut debris or dust into the food packaging? And there you go, so cross-contamination. So it does apply, but you have to do a risk assessment, as has been stated.
Yeah.
Let's have a look. Faith, is environmental monitoring, e.g. listeria, required even if the production zones are all low risk?
Again, that comes back to the risk assessment. The management system has to do a risk assessment, and if it's not a risk for your particular product, if you can verify that, then you can do that. But it all comes down to, the situations that you're in, your product and your environment, and sometimes it applies and sometimes it doesn't. But the power of the management system is that justification.
Okay, thanks. Mark Kwan again, for the food defense requirements, can we use TACCP as per
Threat
PAS
assessment.
1996. Can you use
If
that?
it works, yes, you can use that, if providing you have the documentation of the verification and validation and it fits in with your management system. So they're all tools, and we need as many tools as as we can, and so to take that approach and to verify it and validate it, and the connection to the management system is key.
Yeah, and a few people have mentioned different Carver and Shock, and,
Right, different models. Yeah.
Safe,
Yeah.
PAS 96.
Some of them are a little bit out of date. There's some really updated databases now. So, but yes, all of those useful tools, and if you can put them in and validate them and verify them, you can use them.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Suchi. Keep the good work going. You people are amazing, distributing knowledge every Friday.
That's nice.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah.
Very nice.
Wow, this is great, Jacob. When will the supplement be published that you mentioned?
Well, so it's on my desk. So hopefully any minute now. We've got some team members that are out of the office right now, and we're just putting the final touches for it. But hopefully, really soon, within days. So
and where will we get hold?
To it.
Where will we get hold of the supplement? On the website?
It'll be on the website. Yeah. Keep an eye on the website. We tweet out things as we do it. As I say, we're fairly small and compact, but we do use Twitter, and we have a website, and we do attend meetings and take opportunities of webinars. So just keep an eye on this space.
Okay, Jayant. With all the changes, will FSSC 22000 certification be equivalent to FSMA requirements? Can you confirm that you've covered everything?
So we would not say that. The only person that can say you're FSMA compliant is the FDA inspector. So we're not in a situation where you can do it. It's your responsibility. We can provide you with the tools, but we wouldn't certify you to be FSMA compliant. We would certify you to be FSSC compliant. And we are trying to fill in the gaps so that everybody knows what FSSC certification means. But the only person that can say that you're, FSMA compliant is the FDA. And at this stage, the FDA doesn't accept sort of the GFSI certification schemes as meeting the requirements of FSMA. They do use them also as a tool. So it provides some confidence on the food safety management system of a company, but they need to, check themselves whether you're FSMA compliant. But we're pretty much there. I hope by the presentation that we showed, that we were really trying to close those gaps.
Yeah, quite a few people are asking, will they have access to the presentation? Yes, shortly after we'll send the recording and the slides, slide deck, so yeah, you will get a copy. Somebody asked also, what does multi-site mean that you mentioned in your presentation?
What does what?
Multi-site.
So that would be applied. So if we're going out to certify retail establishments or catering establishments, we need the capacity to sort of certify a subsection of a big chain. So facilitates that, and that's not necessarily recognised by the GFSI. But if we're going to move into a major certification of a retail chain, then we're going to look into the opportunities to sort of using a multi-site type of certification approach.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's new.
Okay. Anna, what is the most recent edition of TS 22002 and ISO 22000? Is it still 2005?
Okay. So 22000 is 2005, and 220.1 is 2009. 22000 is in the process of being updated, so there will be a new version. There's a draft version. It's they're trying to sort of unify the ISO standard, so there will be a new version available in soon. I don't know whether to use the term months or years, but there is going to be it is under revision. 2202.1, I'm not quite sure what the revision schedule for that is. I'm not aware of it now. But okay. 22,000 definitely is well due to be updated.
Right. Just confirming on unannounced audits, you said that there won't be any next year because of 4.1. But how does it work with unannounced audits? What is the schedule sort of when you're certified?
They will have to be done on the surveillance audits. So next year being the transition year, they could start in 2019. And then I think I saw something come up too in the chat around it being that it's anytime, and it could be, right after, let's say, that transition, and they'd be within a certain day range, 30 days, from your coming up certification date. So it's not that they're going to be pulled forward or backwards. So they're going to maintain that same sort of frequency.
Okay, great. Jane's posted a few times, and I've skipped it a few times. Can we safely conclude that FSSC 22000 incorporates the requirements of ISO 22000 and FSMA while meeting GFSI requirements?
FSSC 22000 incorporates the facilities of ISO 22000 and the prerequisite programs and FSSC 22000 requirements. It doesn't incorporate necessarily the requirements of FSMA. We're working to update, to use, to make sure that we have considered or have the facility to consider the requirements of FSMA. So we haven't incorporated all the requirements of FSMA. Some of them are very specific, and so if you're a company producing a certain product, you need to just refer both to the prerequisite program and to FSMA to make sure whether those, some of those updated GMPs apply to you. There are some, very specific requirements written in the legislation that are not necessarily written in FSSC 22000 because we're sort of more flexible. So I wouldn't say that we incorporate all the requirements, but we have the capacity to incorporate all the requirements, if that makes sense. So, the key things, the key elements in the revised version are the key elements of FSMA, like the preventive controls and the allergen management, and we're pulling those in.
Okay, super. I can answer this, Jacob. How can I get my food company certified? First of all, get a copy of the standard and then read it, try and understand it, and do a gap analysis of what your current system is against the requirements. Mel, a good point, is in a packaging company, and our considerations for Allergen, if you've got different printed packaging, if you mix the packaging up and you ended up sending the wrong packaging or mixing some packaging, it could end up on a vanilla yogurt lid could end up on a nut yogurt, and somebody could get sued. So there are controls around printing controls and mixing and segregation and things like that related to allergens. Anything else? Can you see anything else? How long will people have to transition to 4.1 if you're already certified to is it 3?
4.1 next year, 2018 is when it starts. So we will stop certifying to the prior version at the end of this year.
Yeah, and there will be a gap. Did you say there'll be a line-by-line gap showing where FSSC matches up with FSMA? Yeah.
Yes, that's going to be on the website hopefully soon.
Okay. Right. I think we're actually 5 minutes over, so yeah, we'll leave it there. We've got through a lot of questions. It's been perfect, really. A nice overview and lots of Q&A at the end. So hopefully we answered your questions. If not, you can always send them. I'll forward them on to Jacqueline or Kathleen. So, okay. Kathleen, thanks very much for your input from DMB as well, and Jacqueline as well. It's been very enjoyable having 3 in a row rather than 2 as well. We did it. So that's it. So
3 monkeys.
So thanks very much, and hope to see you both again soon.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Have a good
cheers.
day. Bye-bye.
Right, the last thing is to issue your certificate for today that we always get. So you click the in the sidebar, you click the download certificate button, the orange button. That'll take you to the IFSC website, and then you can download your certificate from Dropbox. You do have to either print it and sign your own name, or open it in a graphics editing software such as Paint, and just type your name. I cannot and will not individually personalize 1,300, 1,400 webinar certificates. I'm sorry. But hope you enjoyed it today. We'll be in touch by email with the follow-up recording and the slide deck, and we'll be in touch about further webinars. We've got a training course on the 1st of September that we'll let you know about, and also the next Food Safety Fridays on the 8th of September. Okay, for now, enjoy the rest of your day, enjoy your Friday, have a lovely weekend, and we'll see you soon. Take care, bye.